Welcome to an episode of RPG Reanimator's Acquisition Disorder. In this series, we'll take a look at RPG products that have caught our attention, but we haven't gotten to the table yet. I'm Nathan,
I'm Holly.
and today we'll be talking about four games: Under the Autumn Strangely, Daisy Chainsaw, Raccoon Sky Pirates, and A Town Called Malice. You can find these RPGs online, uh, probably Drive Through RPG or itch.io. We'll put links in the show notes. And we'll be keeping away from any massive spoilers, just covering basics of the game system, setting, that sort of thing. So let's see what's in the library. Holly, what can you tell us about Under the Autumn Strangely?
So, Under the Autumn Strangely is an RPG created by Graham Gentz. I guess the best way to describe it is autumnal horror,
Hmm.
pastoral horror. Um, it is a fully narrative game. It's GM-less, and players for 3 to 6 players, and they each take on the role, or well, there's 3 roles, and it tells you
Hmm.
how to like scale it up for more people, right? So there's
Okay.
3 roles to play. You are in the land called Never Was, and you can either be the traveler, who are people that are lost in the Never Was,
Yep.
and their job is to kind of describe whimsy and or provide whimsy in their descriptions and interactions. There's the Arcadian, and their duty is to kind of provide that autumnal pastoral vibe. So they kind of are describing the scenery, the settings, things like that. And then there's the terror, and their job is to provide like the horror, the omens, the
Hmm.
darkness, and the description. Um, it's typically told in like a 3 chapter structure in which each chapter features one of these roles as kind of like the
Oh,
highlighting role. And then it gives you this kind of easy checklist of when all of these conditions are met, you can kind of conclude the chapter. And that's
okay.
kind of really it. Like it's a very off the rails, like do what you
Hmm.
want, just tell a spooky story kind
So
of
do the
system.
so the characters, the travelers, are they kind of like a more traditional adventurer, or
Yeah, I
are they
think you
like a
can.
group?
Yeah, it could be, it'll either be 1 or 2 people that are the
Mm.
travelers. And yeah, they're kind of the audience perspective of like, I am not a
Oh,
part of this. I am an outsider, kind of finding my way through all of this. Each role also has a relationship to the other 2 roles. You
okay.
can yes and one role and no but the
Oh,
other role.
interesting.
So you can, when they provide a description for something, you can say, no, this is what happens instead.
Hmm.
And you can add on to the other roles descriptions with yes and. So it's kind of an interesting kind of structure, that relationship between all 3 roles. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
almost.
interesting.
Yeah, like a rock paper scissors sort of
Right.
relationship. That's interesting. So does then the horror kind of override the setting, which is then the horror is overridden by
Let's see.
the
Yeah.
travelers?
The horror overrides the traveler. The
Mm.
traveler overrides the setting, and the setting overrides the terror.
Okay,
So, like,
that's
that's that.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting. The traveler yes ands the terror. The terror yes ands the setting. The setting
Mhm.
yes ands the traveler. It's kind of, yeah, it's a different structure. And there's a token system to it to kind of allow for that back and forth
Yeah.
wrestling of control, is like you're passing a token in order to, like, I'm going to know but you, but I'm also giving up something in order to do
Right.
it, kind of thing.
Okay, that's neat. So that's that's pretty wild. How did long do you think a session of that would run?
I think each chapter, it's difficult to tell. I haven't brought it to the table, obviously, which is why I'm here.
Yeah.
But I think each chapter might take about an hour or so.
Okay.
So with 3 chapters, a full game could be, about 3 hours. But the game also encourages, like, you can just do a chapter and walk away. And
Yeah.
time is meant to be purposefully like nebulous and confusing, because that's the Never Was. Like, time isn't
Right.
time is a flat circle or whatever. So yeah, it is okay to kind of come back to it at a much later
Mm.
time. And it's like, where were we? Was it 2 days ago? Was it, 3 months ago? Who knows? So
Yeah, that's interesting, that timelessness.
yeah,
So, what
exactly.
would you do if you were to run it? Would you run this in person, online? What would be your first choice?
I think it's flexible in that it can be done either way. I would just really want to bring like ambiance to it, right? Like low
Mhm.
lighting, spooky music. There's even a whole playlist on Spotify that the creator has provided, so you can
Nice.
like go there, play some music. Um, you are going to need people that are like fully bought in
Yeah.
on and confident in that narrative control. There's no GM driving the system, right? Like
Mm.
there's no GM even saying, okay, let's kind of transition, let's do this. None of that. So you have to have people that are really comfortable
Yeah.
just controlling the narrative, comfortable with these non-traditional systems, because it can be a struggle, when you're not familiar with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I could see, like, the horror player and the setting player maybe combating because 'cause they're almost like co-GM roles, but so are the
Right.
travelers too.
And what's interesting too, like there is a little bit of structure to the setup where the setting, the Arcadian who's the setting, like you get to pick an autumnal pastoral image and a surreal agrarian image.
Oh,
And it gives you some
okay.
suggestions, right? And that's like you're trying to like persist those themes throughout
Mhm.
the story. And then the terror picks one detail and you want again like to persist that theme throughout. So it's kind of an interesting way to kind of
Yeah.
tackle the story.
That image board would be a fun thing to bring to other story games that we play of just like, I wanna have something like this and whatever the picture is.
Yeah, and that's why I don't know, that's why I love this kind of stuff. I'm a
Mhm.
spooky season kind of gal, I just love fall. I love this I don't even know how to describe it, It's like horror, but it's light horror. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's not a traditional type of horror. And it's GM-less, it's diceless, it's just very narrative. And so I think that's just I don't know. I lately these days especially I find myself drawn to the systems
Yep.
that are just so non-traditional. So,
I've heard cozy horror thrown around lately. There's another
yeah.
book that I can't remember the name of, and I'll probably put it in the notes below because I own it. But it's exactly that sort of feel of like, we're all little animal people in the forest serving an eldritch god, and we're all gonna be chill and fine, and everything's cool. But we had to sacrifice the neighbor the other day, and yeah, that kind of like, you're
It's the
cozy,
balance between
but
wanting to
yeah.
be something cute but also loving
Mhm.
horror at the same time.
I like that. So is there anything you would remove from this? I think we've kind of talked about highlighting the
Sure.
pastoral
Yeah, the
aspect.
pastoral horror. I think I can't, it's difficult to make that call if I've never,
Yeah.
when I haven't run it before. I would probably, especially for my first run, and it would be my advice for any person running it for the first time, would be to try and understand, like, especially the first time playing it, a whole group of people never playing it, kind of understanding that you are probably have to provide a bit of a guiding hand, right? Like
Yeah.
this is all super new, super different. So being prepared to provide a little bit of that guidance and maybe taking on either the terror or the Arcadian, where you're kind of that
Oh,
more
sure.
GM system, the GM-ish part of the system as well. But remove, I don't know, the vibes are immaculate, so I can't say that I'd want to remove anything in particular.
Like it. And any other similar games or media?
So the Graham Gantz credits heavily Over the Garden Wall, the
Hmm.
TV show, for the inspiration for the theme of the system, and I agree. I can see where he's coming from. In the style of play, it's very similar to Wander Home, like the token
Hmm.
system, the no dice, no GM, this kind of the weird cozy element to it, even though it's horror.
Sure,
It's
sure.
like a parallel vibe. I don't know. If you know, I guess. It's
Yeah, I
on a
buy that.
similar trajectory to Wander Home, just with horror instead.
Right.
And then like with Bluebeard's Bride, similar in that like you have defined roles that are controlling very distinct
Right.
parts of the narrative, right?
Right.
So, um, yeah, just and also the vibes of that are a little bit more on track with Under the
Yeah.
Autumn Strangely. Maybe not as gruesome though.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I bet you could play if you had someone that was really in like, I just want to do the vibes, they
Yeah.
could play the Arcadian
Right,
versus
right.
wanting
Just
to
like
do the horror.
let's bring out the setting, do some really cool things with the setting. I think that the terror sounds really
Mhm.
interesting, especially if you're really into horror and you're really into kind of this like narrative, kind of creating the story as you
Right.
go, developing the story as you go. And in that way, it's a little similar to Tin Candles, right? Like you start,
Yeah.
you don't know where any of this is going, and you kind of develop it as you go along. The horror kind of makes itself known as you play. So
My next game is Daisy Chainsaw, which I picked up on a recent trip that I should post more of the haul of. This is by Charlotte Liskowski. I can say words, and it is really magical girl combat.
the
Everything,
the cover art is just delightful.
yeah,
It's like Sailor Moon-esque with a
hmm
chainsaw just digging into her enemy. I love that.
right, and the art inside is all pixelized and
Fun.
stylistic with blood splatters all over the place. Yeah, the style is very fun. Even the character sheet is blood
I love
splattered.
that.
Um Also, a note, I really like the ring binding. That's completely tangential to everything, but I don't
Not
know how
enough,
it goes
not
for
enough.
storing, but
Yeah, not enough publishers use ring binding in
yeah.
RPGs. That's fun.
Yeah, and it's a real nice small book for that, but it really is the bulk of this is the combat system.
Hmm.
The idea is you're all magical girls fighting some threat, so Sailor Moon or what have you, and you can get weapons like a baseball bat, brass knuckles, chainsaw, whip, roller skates are even considered a weapon, and you combine two of them with your character and then bring in aspects of those. And it's a grid based combat sort of system that you work with there. But it's got a couple interesting ideas that I really thought were neat. Um, the main one that I saw was the idea of pushing your limits. There was
Hmm.
a specific section there that when you meet certain criteria, you can do like an anime style power up. So like, oh, we're down to like half health. Well, now we're gonna push our limits, and now our attacks do more damage or something.
Ah, that's so fun. You spend
And
like 20 minutes going Super Saiyan or something like that.
exactly,
That's
exactly.
awesome. I love that.
Yeah, and you can like kind of burn out as well too. So you've got this fun like you can use a bunch of magic, but then your team will like tire themselves out. Um, all in all, it seems pretty straightforward to run, but you'd have to do it like grid based.
Is there is there a guide for GMs on like is there like a quick roll guide of like this is what the adventure's going to be, or is it how does that structure look?
That's kind of the downside to it, is it looks like about 66 pages are the combat-ish rules, kind of the character creation, that sort of thing. The DM guide, the Disaster Master, which is a very fun
That's so much
example,
fun.
is about, I think, 7 pages total.
Yeah.
So they mix it up like a season of television, and then they suggest doing like episodic sort of uh, you
Monster
show
of the
up.
week or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. There's a little bit of investigation. You have your home life and your magical life intersect at some level. It kind of assumes you're playing students like Power Rangers or uh
Hmm.
yeah, Sailor Moon again. So I think that's the idea. I wish they had a little bit more of how to create and structure an investigation or the full season.
Mm-hmm. It does sound like a lot of fun. But yeah, I can see where having some guidance would be helpful.
Yeah. And they have some suggestions of like suggested enemies and then things like, oh, you're fighting and civilians are now held hostage, like sort of
Hmm.
things like that. But yeah, just a little bit more structure, I think, would have been clearer to me on how to actually run the game. But I mean, you can also watch the show and you'll probably get a
Right,
exactly like a
right.
good idea.
Well, how would you run it then?
Probably like a Power Rangers, because when I was growing up, I was big into Power Rangers, and there's no Zord component here
Hmm.
of everybody like joining up, but there's not too much difference between that and a Magical Girls, except that there's a mascot that's potentially like a cute little bunny instead of whatever that robot was named. So yeah, probably like that. Really animate it up and then try and highlight the combat system
Hmm.
because there's a
Hmm.
lot of fun things you can do there. The double weapon idea is something I'm seeing in like Hollows coming out, the Raven, Rook, and Descartes game. So
Hmm.
that seems pretty interesting. I like that kind of video gamey smash up.
Yeah, that's fun. Any places people can go for inspiration, media, other games?
Well, Girl by Moonlight is another book on my shelf of shame, as I believe you said. That is by Evil Hat Productions, and it's a Blades in the Dark style
Hmm.
magical girl game. And I'm thinking that might provide some good advice for structuring the outside of things,
Hmm.
and then maybe bring in the combat system from this and kind of see where that goes.
I tell you, it kind of made me think of Kaiju Girls by Grant Howitt. I'm not sure if you're
Hmm,
familiar with it. It's another Grant
I'm
Howitt
not.
game. But yeah, you're Japanese schoolgirls by
Mhm.
day and literal kaiju by night.
That's very fun. Is that a one pager or is
It's a
that a
one pager.
full?
It's one of
Okay.
his free one pagers on itch.io. Yeah, there's even like you roll on a table for like your kaiju form and it's stuff,
Hmm.
but it's very, very Grand Howitt, but also could be a potential place to pull on inspiration if you need it.
Yeah.
It also kind of made me think of well actually sorry, because I'm looking at it now. There's even like a drama table, like yeah, this is the school
Mm.
drama, so it might give you some like
Oh, that's fun.
inspiration for how to do the like not combat focused stuff.
Hmm.
Did you ever play the video game Lollipop Chainsaw?
I'm aware of it, but that is it. That's zombies, right? That's
Yeah, yeah,
the.
yeah. But it's also like the cheerleader with the
Hmm. Hmm.
chainsaw, like similar, kind of give me similar
Yeah.
vibe when I saw
Yeah.
the cover of it, at least. Not a one for one similarity, but
I could see that though, kind of that like peppy outlook on ultra violence.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's the peppy outlook on ultraviolence. That's great. That's a perfect way to kind of encapsulate that.
Let's get another tonal shift and
Yeah.
talk about Raccoon Sky Pirates.
Yeah, couldn't be more different from the Under the Autumn strangely, but more on par with uh oh my gosh, what was the game you just told me? It wasn't Girl by Moonlight. That's stuck in my head now. Daisy Chainsaw.
Daisy Chains.
Yes. So Raccoon Sky Pirates is a game by Chris Sellers, and
Mhm.
it is the story of a group of raccoons or other trash adjacent creatures. Like
Mhm.
the PCs include raccoons, which are the most prevalent, and then you can also
Okay.
be possums or pigeons or roaches.
Roaches. Okay.
Roaches, yep.
Interesting.
Um, and your goal is to build a garbage airship and then
Mhm.
attempt to sail it to suburban America to steal their refuse and their cable TV. It does
Okay.
specifically call out the cable TV. It's just it's fun. The thing that I'm really excited about with this, the characters are very fun. It
Yeah.
is a pretty simple system to pick up, and the characters are charmingly written. Like there's Maria Triple XL, the Colossus raccoon. There's oh my gosh, what was another one that just made me laugh? Rabies Eddie. The skills are there's three skills, right? It's a
Okay.
pretty simple, easy thing. One of the skills can be YOLO.
Mm,
And so yeah, the vibes to this are just very, very funny. It's very
yeah.
chaotic. Your airship is constantly falling apart as you're like
Okay.
attempting to sail. There's like all these maps that are fun, like a map of the town. And so you're trying to like, you know that the suburban area is kind of in the lower right-hand corner from where you start. So you're just attempting to sail over
Gotcha.
America, the mall, the
Yep.
garbage dump, the industrial site, that kind of stuff. And like
Hmm.
as you're going along, you can attempt to like steal things from all these places to kind of prepare for your journey of
Yep.
taking over someone's home. But also like complications arise. I think it's just a very fun it's an easy intro to RPGs. Like
Yep.
I could pick this up with people who've never played an RPG before and kind of sell them on it quick because it's not a high concept like fantasy or whatever. It's like this
Yeah.
is your
You
just
get it.
raccoon, your raccoons, and you're gonna steal garbage.
Do they have like could you crash in one of those other places and then deal with it there, or is it mostly just opportunities for more items?
So the way that the system is structured, it's very interesting. It's a push your luck kind of system, right? So
Hmm.
you kind of declare the skill that you think fits what you're going to do. And well, and there's kind of every spot on the map has a random complication to it.
Yeah.
Then they're like, okay, I'm going to try to do this to fix it.
Okay.
And they roll, and if you pass, you pass. Great. If you fail, you can take the failure and mark a problem with the ship or a problem
Hmm.
with the suburban home that you'll encounter when you eventually get there, or
Okay.
you can play a card that adds a complication, maybe and potentially eventually. So it's like you have it on the table and it stays on the table. And if you have a problem that arises, the complication cards are in a deck and they
Okay.
have these symbols on them. And if you have to mark a problem, like someone fails eventually and they're like, okay, I'm gonna actually mark a problem. They have like these symbols. And it's like, if you mark this problem with this
Oh,
symbol, then you look at
okay.
the table and all of the cards that have that matching symbol on it all happen at once now. So you're like, it may never come up, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it might come up. And then all of a sudden, you go from an airship that's doing particularly well to being infested with squirrels and on fire, and
Yep.
it's like all this like
That's
chaos
fun.
can happen all at once.
That really reminds me of Galaxy Trucker, the board game,
Oh yeah.
where everything's oh, it's great. It's that same feel as you do all this work to build up this ship, and then one thing happens and all the plans are for naught, and you're basically bailing water out of this sinking
Yes,
ship.
the
And
cascading failures, and it's that fun like push your luck of, this may never actually come
yeah,
up, so we're
yeah.
going to take the gamble and say I passed this roll, and that's a problem for tomorrow's raccoon.
So that game, I remember it came in like a box, right? So you
It
get
did.
the
I
deck
have
of
it right here. It
cards.
was that's kind of what drew me to it in the first place. It was like the silly
Yeah.
art. The name, of course, is hilarious. And then I don't like see a lot of RPGs that come in like
Hmm.
boxes. And so in the box, it has the rule book, which is very simple in a great way. The deck of complications, which are all the bad cards and things that could happen to you. A D12, which is easy, cheesy,
Nice.
and then all of the potential characters and then the maps of the potential houses you can go to. Then this is the neighborhood. The neighborhood's always the same.
Okay.
It has all these like, and you can kind of like, the idea is that you get like a model or something
Yeah,
to represent your ship, and then you're moving it through all of these locations in order to get to
that's fun.
your final destination. Yep.
I like that it has then like different paths that you could
Yes.
potentially go in every time.
Exactly. Yeah, and each house is a little bit different too. You have the upscale, the McMansion. You
Hmm.
have the 1980s house, the bungalow. So yeah,
Okay.
you have some
Okay.
different types of houses, and they're even written up a little bit differently of what you're going to find in these places. So, and of
Nice.
course, in the end, when things have started to really go to hell, the
Hmm.
neighborhood wakes up. Or well, there's two ways it can like either. I think it's kind of an inevitability that
Yeah.
you're going to like it's going to reach that critical mass where
Yeah.
either the airship's on fire and you're just like now abandoning ship, or the lights come on in suburbia and all of a sudden like
Yeah.
everyone sees you and the dogs are barking and it's like you got to get out of here now. So there's two
Yeah.
kind of chaotic conclusions to it.
So I suppose, how would you run this? Because it sounds
Oh
pretty
gosh, it's
wild.
it just like chaotically as possible. Like
Yeah.
lean into the disaster. The roles are really going to take you off the rails, and that's where the
Hmm.
fun is because you declare your skill. Like I'm going to run roll YOLO and you roll a D12, but only maybe 4 or 5 of your skills
Yeah.
are YOLO applied and you're matching what you roll on the D12 to like oh, I rolled a 1. What's 1? Ah, shoot, 1 is cunning, not YOLO, so I failed the roll. Like
I see. I
and
see.
failure is going to happen a lot, right? So like
Hmm.
call for those rolls often because it's just silly, it's just fun. And really lean into the push your luck element. Um and yeah, I don't know. It's just like that chaotic, the chaotic
Yeah.
fun, that high energy, beer and pretzels kind of game of
Yeah.
like we're all just getting together and having a goofy time.
Is there a long-term progression for it, or does it aim for a one shot?
Yeah, I think it's a pure one shot
Okay.
system. I don't even think it tries to be anything other than that, which is fine. I respect
Yeah.
that.
Great.
Like this is what it is.
Awesome. So what other similar games are like this? Because I can think of a couple and I know they're probably the same as yours.
Yeah, this is very much in the school, the Grant Howitt School of RPGs in the best
Yeah.
way. It's very like Honey Heist, very Crash Pandas.
Hmm.
Um, do you have any other thoughts on that? Because Honey Heist and Crash Pandas immediately was what I was
Yeah,
thinking of.
that is Honey Heist, especially for the ease of it. I recently got Scurry, which is kind of the same, like animals trying to do things. Mostly got this because it's a real pretty book.
Yeah,
Everything's
that's
pretty in it.
pretty
Um, that leans a little bit more like post-humanity. I like that this is just stealing from houses. I think that's a really fun theme. Kind of reminds me of Goblin Quest with also a
fun.
Grand Howitt one, but yeah,
Yeah.
kind of that. It's
Oh,
gonna
Grant
be a
Howitt.
disaster,
Yes.
but that's the fun.
It's a beautiful disaster. It's a fun
Exactly.
disaster. And I like that. I like that any game that's just like it's all going to go to hell, something's going to
Yeah.
blow up, your player like there's really not a win condition. It's just to have as much chaotic fun as possible and then like end with a big bang. It also makes me think, I don't know, did you ever see that did you ever see that DreamWorks movie? It was called Over the Hedge.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah.
just made me think of that a little bit too. All of, like the
Okay.
little suburban woodland
Mm-hmm.
creatures that are like gonna
Teaming up.
steal like stuff.
They're all
Yeah.
weird. Yeah.
Yep.
I remember the squirrel with coffee, I think was like his big
Yeah,
thing.
there's always
Yeah.
some chaotic squirrel. I think William Shatner played the possum who kept
Yeah.
faking his own death and dramatic acting and stuff. Yeah, I don't know, it just made me think of that too. Just very fun. The characters are all
Yeah.
written to be like bombastic and goofy and yeah.
Well, now I really want to play this because that sounds like a lot of fun.
I think it'd be right up your alley. We're gonna have to bring it out on the next time we
Nice.
meet up again.
Nice. Pivot to the opposite theme, A Town Called Malice. It is a story game, so we kind of started a story game. Now we're going to
And
end with this.
it's symmetry.
Yep, it is A Town Called Malice by David Kizia. I
Hmm.
believe I'm saying that correctly. Same author as Bedlam Hall.
I was
So,
wondering, I was like, where have I
yep,
heard that name before?
yep. He does Monkey Fun Studios has a few, and
Ah,
yeah,
yep.
these are the two I know mostly, and this is Nordic noir slash horror story game.
Okay,
Apparently,
love
there
it.
is a story pillar system it's based on, but it aims to get the vibes of like Twin Peaks, The Thing, Broadchurch, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is another
Hmm,
one that they
okay.
mention as kind of a basis, and it really is that small remote town coming up against some form of darkness.
Hmm,
And
okay.
it's always kicked off by a body being found. And there's always like it focuses a lot on relationships between the players and kind of the isolation of this place.
Is it
So
set? You said Nordic. Is it set in like one of the Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries?
it's
Ambiguous?
pretty, yeah, it's pretty ambiguous. I think you can go anywhere, but it does highlight that it needs to be remote
Okay, yeah,
and
sure.
small, like small population. and really like your characters will have to deal with it. You don't have a way to give it out to somebody else. So
Gotcha.
they one of the example characters might be the sheriff. So that's the
Hmm.
obvious choice with dealing with the body, but even if you didn't, it suggests making it everybody's problem somehow so that you have to deal with it.
So is it a like an investigative game? Like who killed the body, or is it more just
Yes.
a narrative game or
So the way it's really probably more of a narrative game, and the dice mostly just drive kind
sure.
of moments of ambiguity, but it's called a story pillar because there are three pillars that are in play. The first is the body, and basically you're going to put a bunch of dice on that, and as you investigate the body, you're going to be putting dice into the other two events. So you're kind of like
Hmm.
you're shifting these die pools around. The second is the event, and that can be like, oh, we're breaking ground on the new mall. It's going to revitalize the town, right? It's something important to the town that has to happen.
Hmm.
It could even be like a parade or something. It's just some big event that everybody wants to see. And then there's the darkness, and that that could be just hidden secrets like a cult. It could be the thing, right? As an example, is it could literally be a monster of some kind. It's up to the players to choose. So kind of like 10 candles in that
Yeah.
way of you can run it with whatever. But as you go, you're putting dice from the body into these other two events, and those events are what you roll at the end of the game to see did you succeed or not.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
it's possible to succeed at the event but fail the darkness. So like, oh, the parade goes off, but it's bad news because wolves
Interesting.
come in and eat everybody. Or you could fail
Hmm.
both, in which case that's worst case scenario. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's the juggling of that, and then you also get dice for um between players as well. So you might
Hmm.
start out and like my character and your character might have a negative relationship, but if we do a scene to try and fix that, we can switch that dice over to being a positive at the end of the game. So
Okay.
it's got some interesting incentives, I think, that would make for a well-structured story game, because that's usually what those systems of story games are, is trying to drive towards a certain feel. And I
Hmm.
think this would kind of capture that of you're trying to deal with the body, you're trying to deal with relationships, and then hopefully get that event done.
So how do you think you'd run it at the table?
This is my debate here. So I think the first thing I do is make sure like the tone is understood, is this should probably be a dark game, kind of that Nordic noir is everybody's vulnerable and like an open wound kind of feeling where everybody feels so tense, and I that's what I'd want to have there, is even the good relationships are kind of messy. And then I don't know, I've been debating on this, and do you think it would be more interesting to define the threat up front or kind of let that come out and play? Because they have play sets that are your kind of classic like vampires or werewolves
Right.
or whatever, but I
I
don't
mean, you could
know.
always take a leaf out of the Ten Candles book and give one player the power to define like a single thing
Hmm.
about the darkness and then like roll from there and try to
Yeah.
shape it in a Ten Candles way of letting it come out and play. I think I can see benefits to doing it either way, right? Like are
Yeah.
the players going to have any narrative inputs to the darkness at all, or is it the GM's like pushing the darkness on them constantly?
This is really a game you don't need a GM for.
Okay.
So, yeah, in theory, there might be a narrator, but
Uh-huh.
you
I
don't
mean,
really
so
need it.
like a benefit is like if you define it, then it's easy for people to, okay, oh, I see. And then we kind of
Right, right.
we know where we're going, we're sharing this narrative. But you can always, and instead of the 10 candles method of one person comes up with it and secretly gives it to the GM, it's like one person
Mhm.
comes up with the trait and shares it with the group, right? And then it's like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, what I don't know, it doesn't matter, but
Yeah, that
some
makes sense.
definition of the darkness, and then everyone else can then kind of play off of that,
That
especially if it's a
I
GM list, if
like
you're playing a
that.
GM list.
Yeah, because there is like an act 1 and act 2 structure,
Hmm.
and basically it's easier to succeed in act 1. In act 2 it's going to be much more difficult, and everybody gets like 2 spotlight scenes each round. So
Okay.
it, in terms of time that this can take, this seems like a bit longer of a story game, but maybe that's something kind of to bring it back to that trait ideas, put a trait into act 1, and then act 2 is when you allow people to be a little bit more specific of like,
Right.
okay, it is werewolves.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
just weird fur everywhere.
But
It's
it can
yeah.
like it can give you the freedom to develop something in act
Right.
1.
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be strictly defined from the beginning. I like
Yeah.
that. That's interesting.
Yep, it's a well-written book. I
Mhm.
really enjoyed it. I think in terms of similar games, we recently played Something Is Wrong Here,
Ooh,
which
it's a
yeah,
great game.
yep, very small, like that's the whole game in the box. But that aims specifically at a David Lynch sort of feel. Um, do you want to talk about that? That's one you have.
Oh yeah. Something is wrong here is such an interesting story.
Hmm.
RPG. I can't even call it an RPG. It's almost like a LARP, really. You
Yeah.
have a GM that's really just a facilitator that gives the players a location, like you're at a diner, and the prompt of it. You're arguing about work, and
Hmm.
then two people have like a scene together, or two to three people have a scene together, and it's they you have a loose character concept, like there's the optimistic innocent, the analytical pessimist, the eccentric
Hmm.
socializer. So there's like all these character types, very much like a character in a play or a movie, and they kind of have their like overall narrative uh kind of ideas, prompts on how to play these characters, and you just have these scenes together. And so you have
Yeah.
like scenes with different people in different places, but a lot of the time, at least organically, it seemed to me the game doesn't tie these scenes together, but they all
Yeah.
exist in a shared universe, right? Like the same people are having scenes, and they're all kind of related to each other.
Right.
And then you have a scene with just the players like staring at a mirror and talking about what they see. It's a weird game. We need to
Those.
dedicate a whole episode to it, I think, because
Yeah.
it's
That
a
that would be
super
fun.
interesting game. Um, but yeah, almost GM-less,
Yeah.
dark. The prompts are always, it's not lighthearted. It's kind of a dark game, very Lynchian.
Yep. Yeah, and that kind of, to the town called Malice, is basically the town called Malice added more die rolls, I think, to determine where a scene went. So
Sure.
when we played it, it was just kind of like, yeah, we went, and then someone did a basically an edit and said like, okay, we're cutting it there.
Yeah, and like a lot of time these things came to natural conclusions or
Right,
whatever,
right.
but so is the game is told in scenes, a town called
Right.
Malice it's kind of told in
Right.
scenes. That's interesting. I
Yep.
like that kind of structure.
Yeah,
It's
and
not the
it's a
first game that's done
little,
that.
yeah, it's a little more explicit too, which would be maybe useful if you were newer to these things of a scene has a spotlight player, and that is
Right.
the person who's kind of calling the shots for that scene. They'll add one more person, and then there's like a meta currency that you can spin to add in more people or another
Oh, interesting.
location or something.
Okay.
So rather than just being like Something Is Wrong Here is very free form of just being like, we'll have three people here.
Right.
This ties it behind a little bit of structure, which might be useful.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
all in
I
all,
feel like it could be. Is it potentially GM-less? Is it
yeah,
strictly GM-less as stated, or you could have a GM or
I believe the default is no GM, and it suggests
okay.
having that narrator role for maybe
Got
someone
it.
that's, if you have a group that's unfamiliar, have that be the person that's run more of these.
Got it.
And it does some
Interesting.
interesting, like, uh, each role comes with a specific place. So
Hmm.
the sheriff would have the sheriff's office, and you'd add one NPC there.
Hmm.
So the town definition is a little bit more fleshed out initially, because that was one thing during the The other game was we kind of had to make it up everything as you went. I think this might be nicer if you like a little bit of structure in your town to
Right.
prompt yourself.
Sure. It makes me think of a much darker form of like Brindlewood Bay, and that like you have
Yeah,
like these
yeah,
scene structures. It's almost a little bit like a weekly, well, this one's a movie, and
right.
Brindlewood Bay is more of like a TV show, right? But that kind of
Yeah,
like told in scenes, and not the like the chit chat in between scenes. There's other RPGs like that, and they're none of them are coming to me right now. But there are RPGs out there where it's like it's told scene by scene without
right,
the fluff in the middle between scenes.
right, right. And then two, this also explicitly says it does not have to be sequential.
Okay.
And so if you want to have a flashback scene,
I like
go
that.
for it. Yeah, it's a neat idea. It keeps it loose. Um, we need to play more story games, I think, is what I'm really saying. This looks
I
like a
think
lot of fun.
that's the trend that our like particular group of people are going toward more, is these
Mhm.
weird narrative games that I love. I love them.
Thanks for listening to an acquisition disorder episode with the RPG Reanimators. We hope this brief examination of a few exciting books has sparked some interest. Be sure to check the show notes on where to find these and support the authors of these. None of these are big names, I don't think necessarily, but
I don't think
they're
so.
they're making amazing work. Join us on Discord to chat with us and other gamers, and find the RPG Reanimators podcast on your podcast app of choice. And don't forget to check out the all kinds of It's Alive actual plays that we're making. There's some really good stuff with public access coming out pretty recently, and hopefully all kinds of new systems that we're running. So we'll see you next time with our next batch of ill advised purchases. Bye.
Bye. Man, my shelf of shame just grows larger every year.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the RPG Reanimators podcast for horror scenario reviews, interviews, gaming discussions, and more.